Hey, and welcome back to another video. So in this video, we'll be taking a look at this Motorola QUENCH prototype that I recently got from a prototype lot of Motorola phones that I purchased off OfferUp. If you already have not seen that video, it's up here and it'll be also on my channel, but you can use this card over here to go to that video directly. This one is not like a drastic different model from the final model, but this is a testing unit that was used by Motorola or AT&T or some company with respect to telecommunications, because this thing does not have a proper serial number, neither does it have FCC markings or anything like that. I'll show you at the end. The battery bay is quite empty. There's just a bunch of numbers and nothing really that you'd find on a final production model. So definitely a testing unit that was never meant for the public. But in terms of hardware and software, it's very identical to the final model. There are a couple of phones that I found in that lot that were never released to the public, so I'll be doing videos on those and all the other prototype phones as well in an upcoming set of videos. So don't forget to leave a like on this video so I know that you want to see that content, and also it helps this video get on YouTube's algorithm. And to get notified whenever I upload those videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below and ring that bell notification button to get the notification to your phone whenever I upload any new video. I'm on Instagram, Discord, and Twitter, and you can follow me on those using the links down in the description below. And now let's jump right into this video. Also, if you're interested in more prototypes at the time of this video's upload, I've done an entire playlist of prototype phones like the Nokia N8 prototype, which is very different from the final model, the Sony Ericsson Paris, a phone that was never released, and a bunch of other prototypes like Blackberries and Nokias and stuff. So you can go check them out in the link in the description. There'll be a playlist of prototype phones, so the prototype playlist, you can go find them down in the description below. Now, starting off with a bit of history for the Motorola QUENCH. Now, this one will be a bit older than the release models because this thing is a prototype. The original phone was announced in 2010 February and released in 2010 April. So this thing must be about from late 2009-ish. Maybe 2009 December, November, something like that, because they'll be testing it at the time before release, and they'll be getting ready all the software and stuff before the final production model is released. So this thing is a bit older than the final model. The Motorola QUENCH and the Motorola Cliq XT, basically the same phone. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this phone because Motorola basically promised that they'll be giving this thing the Android 2.1 Eclair update, which is the successor to the OS this thing is running. So this thing is running Android 1.5 Cupcake, and Motorola promised that they'll be giving the this phone the 2.1 Eclair update, but they never really went around to giving it. There are some regions that did get it. I cannot confirm, the information online is very vague, but some websites say that some regions did get it. But in the US, I'm pretty sure this thing never got the Android 2.1 update, and a lot of people were really pissed about it. And my one is also running the 1.5 Cupcake update. So Android 1.5 Cupcake, this is basically what it feels like and what it looks like. It's back when camera and camcorder were separate, and that's your old school Android. And this thing, obviously, as you see, it has Motorola Blur. The Blur logo is vaguely printed at the back there. There's no Motorola logo on this phone, unlike a lot of other phones. And the final model also didn't have a Motorola logo at the back. It just had a Blur logo there. The Motorola logo on this is up front here. Pretty interesting looking phone. And this is the white and gray model that wasn't not really common. A lot of people went for the black model back in the day. So there was a lot of controversy behind this phone regarding the update, but apart from that, it's just your run-of-the-mill budget Android phone that would have just been on the AT&T network or something like that. I forgot which network it came on, but it also came unlocked, and this was quite a popular phone, hence the controversy when it didn't get an update. This phone sold really well because it had a bunch of good features that we'll discuss very soon. For its price range, it was probably in the roughly $200-ish price range. I have it here in my notes. Yeah, it's about $200. It's $180 to $200 price range. It's really hard to get a proper price range from 11 years ago, but around $180 to $200. So pretty decently priced as well. So that was just a quick rundown of the history of this phone. And now let's jump right into specs and everything else regarding the Motorola QUENCH. So first, let us power this thing on and have a quick go around of the phone as well while it's powering on. So up top here, we have our speaker grills. We have two speaker grills for the same speaker. They're just split into two separate pieces. That's just how it is. There's an LED notification light. I don't know if you saw it earlier. It's underneath the glass here. It kind of blinks occasionally. We have the Motorola logo up here as well. Down here, we have our trackpad. So this is a trackpad actually, and the selection button as well. There's a grainy pattern like that. When you're going downwards, when you're scrolling downwards against the grain, I really don't like how it feels, but when you're scrolling with the grain, it feels quite nice. And the Motorola Blur logo is there because this thing has Motorola Blur. We'll talk about the trackpad a bit later. Then over here we have the multi-settings button. So when you press that, if you're in camera, you get the camera settings. If you're in browser, you get browser settings. If you're in any app, you'll get the settings relevant to that app when you press this button. Let me give you a quick example. So if you go into the camera here, if you I'll be demoing this later as well. If you go into the camera here and you press this, you get the camera settings as you see there. So that's a quite handy button that no modern Android phone has, but I really like that when it existed. So it changes depending on which app you are to bring up settings. We have a quick search, we have a home button, and we have our back button as well. And I told you this is a trackpad, so let me show you. As you see there, it is a trackpad. A lot of Motorola phones from the time had these trackpads. Moving against the grain is kind of rough and I really don't like it. Moving up and down, as you see, there's a grain pattern. That's actually a physical grain for grip. But moving right and left with the grain actually feels quite nice. I just don't like against the grain. But it is what it is. There is a pattern for grip there. Now let's have a quick look at the bottom of the phone as well, the way bottom here. We have two stereo speakers, one over here, and these stereo speakers are really nice, and we'll talk about this towards the end of this video, and you can see it in the segmented section of this video as well. And we also have a microphone down here. Moving on to the side of the phone, we have a micro USB port here. We have our volume rockers. We have our 3.5mm headphone jack as well. We have a camera at the back here. We'll talk about that in a bit. And moving on to this side, we have our lock button and a dedicated camera button, lock and power button, dedicated camera button. At the bottom, we have a button to release the back cover. When you press it, it releases the back cover. At the back, we have no Motorola branding. We have a Motorola Blur branding down here, very vaguely in this white and gray model. And it was the same on the final model as well. That's not just because this thing is a prototype, that's just on all the models. And we have a 5-megapixel with its LED flash over there, which we'll talk about a bit later. So that's just a quick go around of this phone, and overall it's not a solidly built phone, but it's decently built. The buttons kind of feel plasticky, expected for a budget phone from 2010, but overall the plastic at the back and all, it's really decent. It's nothing too major, it's nothing too horrible either. It is what it is. It's a budget phone from 2010. You cannot expect stellar build quality with one of these, but it is what it is. Like I said, the buttons are a bit clicky, a bit plasticky, but it's okay. The build quality is overall pretty decent. So at this price range, you'd expect the phone to not have an amazing display, and the display is okay on this thing. However, it is a TFT LCD display. Now, usually TFT LCD display means 95% of the time it just has 256,000 colors. There are TFT LCD displays with the full 16 million color complement, like the Nokia N95's display, but the N95 was an N-series premium phone, so that thing's TFT LCD had the full 16 million colors. This thing, on the other hand, is a 256,000 color TFT LCD display, so not the full color palette. It has 256,000 colors instead of 16 million colors, and the way they compensate for the lack in certain colors is by increasing the saturation in the other colors, and that kind of does the trick, but it's not ideal, and it's not going to show all the colors on a properly taken photo. Now, on a lot of websites, this thing is listed as 65,000 colors, but I've seen a lot of phones in my time. Like, I own a lot of phones, and I've seen phones with 65,000 colors. This thing is definitely not 65,000 colors. This is 256,000 colors. So some of the websites got it wrong. This is 256,000 colors, not 65,000 colors. But nevertheless, it is a TFT LCD display. And the size on this thing is 3.1 inches, so 3.1 inches diagonally like that. 320 by 480 pixels, 320 by 480, your standard resolution for the time for a budget phone. 3:2 aspect ratio with a pixel density of around 186 pixels per inch. It's also protected by Corning Gorilla Glass of the first generation, and yeah, a pretty basic display. Nothing too major, nothing too great. It gets the job done, and like I said, this phone was really popular in the day, so the display clearly was not an issue. The biggest issue with this phone was its software updates. This thing's display, even in 2021, does a really decent, well, maybe actually a good job overall for what it is. And TFT LCD displays are known for being really good in terms of durability, as they don't really get black lines and stuff. After some time, the light, the LED backlighting might go away after a really long time because the LEDs burn out. But if you keep the brightness low and stuff, you won't have that problem. I've never had that problem actually, because I keep my brightness very low on all my older phones. And these TFT LCDs don't get black lines very easily, so they're really tough, and that's one advantage TFTs had over standard LCDs. But on this display, everything is just pretty basic. The outdoor performance in terms of brightness is actually quite good. This phone has a very bright display. This is actually medium. The colors are towards the saturated side as expected with a TFT LCD display. They're not overly saturated, but they're saturated to a noticeable level. The pixel density is quite low, so you're definitely going to see the pixels at 186 pixels per inch. But overall, for a budget phone from 2010, it's pretty damn usable, even here in 2021. If you ignore the other facts of this phone, that it's really old. I'm not a very judgy person on displays, but I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of people who'd hate this display. But since I've used a lot of phones over my time and I own a lot of phones, I'm not really that judgy. Overall, a pretty decent display for its time. So lifting up the hood, we can see that the Motorola QUENCH, or the Motorola Cliq XT, whatever you want to call it, is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon MSM 721A, MSM 7201A. It's not 721A, it's 7201A. So Qualcomm Snapdragon MSM 7201A, which is a single core processor clocked in at 528 megahertz, and it's based on the ARM11 architecture. So ARM11 Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, single core, clocked in at 528 megahertz. This was before the LG Optimus 2X, so everything is single core in 2010. The 2X was the first phone with a dual core processor in 2011. This thing also has an Adreno 130 as its GPU for graphics processing. It has a micro SD expansion slot, probably up to around 16 to 32 gigs. I couldn't really find any information on that online. And it used to come with a 2 gig SD card, but that 2 gig SD card is now missing, so that's not available. It has 512 MB of internal storage as well, and 256 megs of RAM, which is more than enough to run the operating system, which was Android 1.5 Cupcake. Now, the update that was cancelled, the 2.1 Eclair update, Motorola reasoned that this processor and this hardware basically would not be able to run it. But people on XDA found out that it would easily run on this phone, and Motorola most likely cancelled the update for just the fact that they wanted to sell a different phone and keep this one unupdated. But if you really want to update this thing, you could have gone to XDA and done the update where XDA. But yeah, that's basically what's under the hood of the Motorola QUENCH. And now let's move on to software. Now, this thing being a prototype, you'd probably expect for it to have like some features, some hardware features that the final model doesn't have. But like I said, this is a software prototype. This is not a hardware prototype. A lot of the testing was probably done in terms of software. So the hardware is a final, it's a final design to what the final model got. So there's nothing to discuss in terms of hardware on this phone. So yeah. Anyway, we can now move on to the software portion of this video and discuss the operating system and everything else. So like said before, this thing is running Android 1.5, which is Android 1.5 Cupcake. The name was Cupcake. And like I said, it did not get the update to 2.1 Eclair. In some regions, I think it did, but it's really vague. I mean, for such an old phone, getting information like that is kind of vague, and the forums usually don't load properly and stuff because it's been 11 years. But this one is running the Android 1.5 Cupcake update, as you can see there, because obviously this phone was a testing phone, and this was way before the 2.1 update was even considered on this thing. As you can see, it runs just fine. There are no prototype testing software as far as I can tell on this phone. Everything is pretty standard, so this was probably just a performance tester or something like that, or there's stuff that I cannot access from here and I'll have to plug it to a computer to probably access that stuff. Motorola probably had their prototype suite or whatever for them to access parts of the phone that everyone else could not access, and this phone probably had that all open. Developer options on this thing is surprisingly weirdly turned off actually, but that may be just in terms of user developer options, but the other developer options probably is accessible when you plug this thing to a computer, because like I said, this is a testing sample. As you see, this is your interface on Android 1.5. It's really snappy as well, because this was the original update, so it has to be snappy. So it loads very fast, it scrolls really fast. I'm not going to connect it to the internet, because the moment I connect it to the internet, this phone is going to freeze, because this thing is old, and the newer Wi-Fi networks just wreak havoc on such an older phone. But yeah, it is what it is. It's your old school Android Cupcake, and leave a big thumbs up if you used Android at the time of Android Cupcake and Android Eclair. If you're an OG Android user, leave a big like on this video. As you see, this is basically what you had in the day. You had Motoblur. You couldn't get rid of that annoying thing. Assassin's Creed comes preloaded, the original game. That could technically be a pre-testing version. I don't know if that's even real. I didn't go to click it. Brain Challenge, and there's a bunch of other stuff as well. Motorola Get Apps, Midnight Pool. I remember that game. It was on a couple of phones. We have YouTube widgets by Claro, TIM, and stuff like that. No network as far as I can tell. Of course, this probably was a company testing prototype and not a network testing prototype. So yeah. That is just basically the software experience on Android 1.5 Cupcake on the Motorola QUENCH prototype. Very identical to the final model. There may be some differences that I didn't notice, or maybe they're just only accessible where a developer suite by Motorola. Anyway, that was the software on this phone, and now let's move on to the camera. Now, the camera on this thing is nothing major, but it's actually quite a good camera. It can take some really nice photos for what it is, for a 5 megapixel shooter from 2010. So the camera on this thing is a 5 megapixel autofocus camera with a single LED flash. As you can see there, it's a pretty beefy LED flash as well. And it can record video at CIF resolution at 25 FPS. Let me put the resolution up here. I don't have that right off my head. So CIF at 25 FPS. So pretty decent camera for a budget phone back in 2010. And it actually shoots decent photo and video as well for what it is. So now let's go into the camera application here, and we can see what it's like. Now, like I said, camera and video are separate. So this is the camera application, and your settings are in this multi-menu like thing I mentioned earlier. So you press that, and it varies depending on what app you're in. And since we're now in camera, we have camera settings. We have picture resolution, color effects, reset settings, advanced settings, and we have picture quality by good, better, and best. So for the camera test, we'll be putting it on best. There's no HDR mode or anything like that. This was 2010 on a budget phone. You could not expect those things. Go back, and then we have our interface. We have flash, we have GPS, geotagging, 5 megapixel, and the zoom. We can zoom with the volume button over here, and we have a camera button as well, like I mentioned earlier, so you can point and shoot to take a photo. I currently don't have an SD card in there. I took it out, so that's why it's not there. But like I said, you can zoom with this as well. Why isn't it doing it? Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why, but you can zoom using your finger as well. So that is just the camera interface on the phone, and you press this to take a photo as well. So let's go to the video interface, because this is Android 1.5. So video interface, you have your always on flash if you want, and we have settings as usual. Light means you're always on flash. Gallery, camera, settings, you can go into settings, color effects and stuff as well. Video quality, MMS, and high for SD card. So I'm going to put it at the max resolution like I showed you earlier. High for SD card. Is there a very high option as well? Nope. I made sure when I was recording that there was no higher option. So high is the max high. Reset settings. So we go to advanced settings. We have autofocus and white balance as well. So that is the camera and camcorder interface on the Motorola QUENCH. And now I'll be putting some camera and video samples from this thing. It has no front camera, as you can see there. So the camera and video samples will be all during the day, shot around my area, and they'll be all at 5 megapixel. There's no HDR feature, like I said, and it'll also be followed by a video sample as well. So now let's jump right into the camera samples. Now, something that I recently didn't know, like I think I mentioned earlier as well, was the stereo speakers on this thing. This thing has actually one speaker over here and one speaker over here. So front-facing stereo speakers. That was quite surprising for me, for a budget phone to have stereo speakers. But I guess it was cheaper for Motorola to include that as a main feature instead of making the camera better or whatever. But the speakers on this thing are really good. So let's increase volume to max there. Volume max at 15. And let's play some music. Well, ringtone from the settings here, because I can't play real music because of copyright reasons, obviously. So here we go. So there we go. And that beat plucker, this one over here, where is it? This ringtone, the beat plucker up top, this one. Yeah, that one I think everyone knows. That was a very common Motorola ringtone. But yeah, that was the stereo speakers. As you saw there, they're really loud, they're really clear, they're not tinny at all. Blew me away actually. For a budget phone, such a small budget phone like this, it has a really good pair of stereo speakers. So big thumbs up to that. Kind of really surprised me there with its speakers. So that's definitely a highlighted feature. They didn't advertise the speakers as much as I remember, but they should have, because they're really good. Either way, that were the stereo speakers on the Motorola QUENCH. So now let's turn this thing off and we can go ahead and take off the battery, and I can give you the battery specs and show you inside the battery bay as well. Like I said, this thing is a prototype, so the battery bay does not have all the FCC markings and stuff it's supposed to have. Let me do this off camera because this button is a bit finicky. So first let's start off with the battery and then go over the rest of the stuff, the stickers and stuff at the back. So the battery on this thing is a BP6X battery by Motorola. It is a 1430 milliamp hour battery, so a pretty standard battery for Motorola at the time. 1430 milliamp hours. The Motorola QUENCH or the Motorola Cliq XT on this battery can get up to about 500 hours on standby on 2G and about 450 hours on standby on 3G, so not much of a difference on 2G and 3G there in the grand scale of things. And the talk time of this thing on 2G is about 7.5 hours, and the talk time on 3G is about 6 hours and 50 minutes to 7 hours ish. So again, not much of a big difference. This 2010-2011 was a time where the battery consumption in 2G and 3G was kind of diminishing in difference, so people were definitely switching to 3G more because the battery difference was not that much. So pretty decent battery life for its time actually. According to user reviews, it performed way more than the mentioned battery life. So this thing could actually power the phone a bit better than what was mentioned on the product listings and the specifications. So big thumbs up on that. They underdid the battery life there in terms of advertisement, and it performed way better. A lot of people said that this phone actually had a really good battery life. But yeah, this is the back of the phone. As you can see, very basic. No FCC markings, no proper serial number. Extremely basic. These markings are there, the trash marking and stuff. And there is this, I don't know what this is. Is this FCC? I don't know. But there is way more information at the back of a Motorola phone. As you see, there's no proper serial number on this thing. There's just this silly number. When I run this number, it gives this some app or something. It's on a Chinese website or something. This number does nothing. This number sends an app. It talks about some Chinese app or something. I don't know. But the phone is made in Brazil, as you can see there. So definitely not a final production model, as you can see there. That's the internal battery bay. The Mint SIM is what this phone liked. As you see, it's a micro SIM, mini SIM over there. Oops, sorry, a nano SIM. I keep mixing up the SIM names. That's a nano SIM. So it kind of liked the Mint mobile SIM. It didn't like the older AT&T SIMs, and it takes a full-size SIM card, as you can see there, but I've put the nano SIM over there and it works just fine. So that was the battery bay, and as you can see, this phone is still in its testing phases. It's not something that would have been released to the public as a whole. But now let's just go power this thing back on and continue with the video. In terms of additional features, this thing had a bunch. It had like radio and a lot of like smaller, cheaper additional features that budget phones would have. It had quick office, it had an organizer, a photo and video editor, voice memo, just a bunch of software related features. Nothing major in the way of extra hardware features. Definitely one of the hardware features that in terms of extras is this trackpad that a lot of Motorola phones had, such as the Motorola backflip, the Motorola flip out. A lot of phones had this trackpad, a lot of Motorola phones, and this one is one of the bigger ones. But I just don't like I said earlier, I just don't like that when you scroll down against the grain, it's kind of uncomfortable, it's kind of rough on your hand, but when you go with the grain, it's quite nice. The stereo speakers are definitely another additional feature, like I mentioned earlier, really good additional feature, may I say so. And this thing shipped in black, white, in a licorice color, and purple as well. The purple color is really nice, but it's really rare. This is the white with the gray back, and this thing again is a prototype, so like I said, it's very identical to the final model, but it may have some software differences that I cannot access without Motorola Suite software. So yeah, that was just basically some of the additional features that this phone has. Nothing too major. It's just a budget phone from 2010, and this being a prototype didn't make a huge difference either, because this one is very identical to the final model. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's a prototype Motorola QUENCH from 2010, or Motorola Cliq XT, whatever you want to call it. As usual, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, leave a big thumbs up on this video, and stay tuned for my upcoming videos by hitting the subscribe button and ringing the bell notification button as well. I'm on Instagram, Discord, and Twitter, and you can follow me on those using the links down in the description below. A big thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in my next video.